What's going on, everybody? We have the meta snapshot for patch 13.17. This is going to be the final meta snapshot of set 9 because we're going to be prepping for 9.5 later on. I believe it comes out on September 13th. So mark your calendars, we're going to be all over that, but let's get into how to prepare for the final 2 weeks of our climb right now. So there was like a minor patch at the end of this set. Normally they do wild patches for the last patch, but this time it wasn't anything too crazy. But nevertheless, there were some minor adjustments that we're going to be making to the meta snapshot, as well as some new comps that may emerge and may become pretty popular as the set winds down. So in the S tier, Challengers, Strategist Azir, Deadeye, Aphelios Bastion, and Sorcerers, it's kind of just like a reordering. Nothing really crazy happening here in the S tier. In the A tier, we have Shadow Owls, Yasuo, Karma, Kaisa, Noxus, Demacia, Shurima, Rek'Sai, Gunner, Samira, Akshan, Built Different, Tristana, Rogue, and Ekko. So you may be surprised at these two, Rogue Reroll and Ekko Reroll. They changed Rogue a little bit, so they're a lot better now. Well, not a lot, they're a little better now. So if you ever get favorable spots for them, I definitely recommend going for these. Oh, and as a reminder, I'll let you know which comps are gonna kind of be saying bye-bye heading into set 9.5. That's gonna be the Deadeye comp. They're getting rid of Deadeyes. Challengers, they're having Yasuo being taken out, so that goes for Ionia as well. Shadow Owls are being removed completely. Demacia is having Lux and Garen removed, so this is the last time to spin to win. Akshan's being removed. Tristana and other Yordles are being removed, so like Teemo RR probably going to be saying goodbye to that, and Zed as well. I think that's mainly most of them. In the B tier, we have Teemo RR, Ravenous, Warwick, Jinx, Kayle, Riftwalker, Kassadin, Multicaster, Zed Reroll, and Double Trouble Taliyah. And so you can see not too much has changed that much. There are some things that are kind of rising up, so we'll have to keep an eye on them as the patch moves on. Moving on into the Legend tier list, we have Urf, Poro, and Ezreal going to be the top dogs. Ornn and Caitlyn going to be a close second, and then the rest of them after that. Moving on into the comps, let's get into Challengers. So I might do more of a speed run this time because we've been playing these comps for quite a while now. So I'll try not to repeat myself for all the returning viewers. So in Challengers, not too much has kind of changed. It's just a generic cheap build that you could use to play other stuff later on. So you could go into legendaries, you could play a lot of legendaries with the Challengers. It's just a very cost-efficient build that kind of stabilizes at a lot of different points in the game because in the beginning, you have Samira, which is really powerful. In the mid game, you have Kalista, which could hold pretty much any items. And then in the mid to late game, you have Yasuo and Kaisa. Yasuo being like a CC machine, Kaisa being like a good general backline carry. And then in the late game, you could just throw in random legendaries to kind of complement your team. You could also shift into an Ionia build if you get like a lot of Ionia spats. And a lot of the legendaries use Challenger spat really well too. So Aatrox Challenger and Bel'Veth Challenger both really good, but the good news is that you do not need the Challenger emblem to kind of really boost up this team. It's just strong on its own, but with the Challenger it becomes even better. Whereas if you compare that to some of the other comps we'll look into, they really need the emblem to really spike the team, and it's literally like the difference between being like S or A tier in those cases. But really solid comp at all stages in the game. And the items, they do matter to some extent. Let's take a look back up here again. Like Edge of Night Yasuo, is it the best item on Yasuo? Yes, it is, but you don't like completely need it. Kaisa really loves the Spear of Shojin, but if you have a Rage Blade, it's kind of the same thing. It's not as good, but it's still pretty decent. And then you could do like Morello, Guardbreaker, Jeweled Gauntlet, Archangels, all sorts of any damage and AP items work on Kaisa. So lots of different builds you could kind of make. Onto the next build, we have Strategist Azir and Lux. So this one is going to be a lot of people's bread and butter because Azir is just really, really powerful right now. And I would get used to playing Azir because in the next set, it seems like a lot of comps can fit the Azir into their builds. I, for one, personally only play Azir with a Rage Blade. And then with that, pairing it with a Static Shiv just makes it a lot more valuable. And then if you have a healing augment, I like having a third damage item, but like even if you don't, third damage item is perfectly fine. And then your two tanks are either going to be Nasus or Jarvan, and then you complement it with a secondary carry of Lux. The great thing about Lux is that you only need 2 items for her because you could use one of the Radiant items from Demacia and just really get her to pop off that way. Next build we have up is going to be the Deadeye build. So Deadeyes, again, this comp's not going to exist in the next set. They're going to like rename to what are called Vanquishers. And Aphelios is actually turning into a gunner, which is kind of funny. But nothing too much has changed with this comp as well. Rageblade Aphelios is going to be great, +2 damage items. Deathblade obviously going to be the best secondary item. And then third item, just put whatever you can on him. Urgot, BT Titans plus third item, going to be great for you. And then you complement it with Freljord to get some penetration. And then you just throw in random late game tanks as the game moves on. So that could be Sion, that could be Shen. Even further on, you could add in a Heimerdinger. You could even take out the Freljords if you have the shredding from Heimerdinger and then play other units instead. You could also use all sorts of legends with this build, but some people like Master Yi because pumping up is pretty solid with this comp. Pretty item dependent, but if you get them, this is a very, very powerful comp. Next up we have is Bastion Aphelios. Similar version to the comp before, except this one revolves around having 2 Rageblades. 2 Rageblades, super duper duper important because the Bastions really buy you a ton of time. If you ever get a +1 Bastion, then 6 Bastion is incredible for your team, but you don't need it to kind of really play everything out. This did get nerfed a little bit, but it's still very, very powerful, so you could definitely still get a lot of wins with this. Next build up we have is Sorcerers. So Sorcerers is a little bit weird. It's very consistent because Vel'Koz is playable in the late game and very good in the mid game, but the only times it kind of struggles is if you don't hit either like a 1-star Ahri or if you have trouble finding a 2-star Lux, one of the two. Vel'Koz can sometimes make up for that and kind of bleed you out into like a 5th or a 6th, but getting those Luxes, getting those Ahris definitely pushes you into like the 3rd and 4th territory, and then if you get like an Ahri 2 perfect items, then those are the games you're gonna win out on. This comp also struggles a bit with finding tanks. There are a lot of different versions of this build, so one example is you could play like Kassadin in the mid game in order to get Bastion and Void to get a little more frontline. Swain is really good in the early game, but definitely falls off later, so sometimes you need to get other tanks to really get your team going, or get some augment that makes your team a little tankier. The way Ahri works is that she kind of needs like a little time into the fight to really ramp up because she needs to cast her spell, I believe 3 times before she gets her big ult off. So that's why frontline is so important with this comp, and it's something that is a little troublesome sometimes. The good news is that if you are bleeding out because you didn't hit too many things, oftentimes a Lux 1 will kill like a couple of units because she's good at single target damage, so you rarely lose by like 50 units when playing this team, which is pretty nice. So just like a pretty consistent comp, nothing too crazy, but if you do get +1 Sorc, if you do hit Lux 2 early, if you get a Ahri 1 early, that is when this comp is going to like just push above into the edge right now. Going on into the A tier, we have Shadow Owls. Again, this is one of the comps that are going away in the next set, but if you ever have Shadow Owl emblem, it is just so incredible. I actually don't know why they're removing Shadow Owls. I thought they were one of the more interesting traits of the set because we haven't really seen anything like this before, but it looks like they didn't find this that fulfilling of a comp, even though I think it's pretty cool. I think it's because they lacked a tank. Their tank is a 1-star Maokai, and that just doesn't fly in most cases, and Viego was pretty useless for most of the set. I feel like if some of those were adjusted a little bit, maybe if Maokai was like a 3 cost, maybe we would have seen more action from this team. Or if this was maybe like a 3-5-7 synergy instead of a 2-4-6, who knows, maybe something else could have happened. But I guess we'll never know. So last chance to play this. Kalista, I think, is a pretty solid unit. Rageblade is just required on her. That's the only bad thing about this. And then Gwen is super cool, but I don't know. She just never really popped off that hard, even though I think she's like a pretty cool unit as well. But in the late game, you definitely solidify this team with Aatrox and Senna. Senna is an absolute monster. And they're making her more of a carry in this last patch rather than a support, though she still obviously provides great shielding for your team. Next build up we have is Yasuo Ionia. Similar to the Challenger comp, instead of running 6 Challenger, you run 4 Challengers with 6 Ionia. This is going to revolve around playing with the Ionia spatula a bunch. So in the late game, Bel'Veth, Aatrox going to be great Ionia spat holders, but you could also throw it on Kaisa if you really want in the meantime. Other things you could do is playing like Karma carry, capping off your late game with Ahri, itemizing Shen really heavily. There are a lot of different things you could kind of do with this comp, and you could fit a lot of the other legendaries in there because you have 2 flex spots in Kaisa and Kalista to kind of like fit whatever you want. Probably one of my favorite comps of this set. I think during the Azir Yasuo meta, this became one of my bread and butters throughout the set, but it kind of got nerfed after that patch, but they are re-emerging in the last 2 patches. Next build up we have is Karma Reroll. One of my personal favorites as well. Karma, I think, is really cool. She is in the next set, I believe, so we'll still be playing a lot of her with the Invokers. But for some reason, a lot of people ask me how good this comp is. I don't know why. No one asked me as many questions on other comps, but Karma Reroll, very, very solid. You definitely only want to play this if you do get a lot of copies of Karma, because he's really the only unit that kind of matters in this build. So if you ever get like a lesser champion duplicator at the start of the game or at Wolf Camp or something like that, or if you get like Golden Ticket, those are the times where I would really consider this comp. Other times I would consider this is if I get something like Cruel Pact and I'm looking for 3-cost reroll or like March of Progress, you could definitely consider this as well in those cases. Next build up we have is Void Kaisa. With Void, I generally only play this with +1 synergy, so if you're playing Bard and you roll into this, definitely go for this comp, or if you get any of the augments that give Void +1, because Baron is an absolute monster, and they changed Baron a little bit in the patch preview if any of you guys caught that video a little earlier on this week. Void is going to be a little weaker in the mid game, but stronger in the late game, so instead of being like a top 4 comp once you get the Baron, and like sometimes sneaking in a 3rd or a 2nd or even a 1st if you high roll, it's more so going to be either maybe like a 3rd or 6th place comp, which generally is still fine on average. It's just like moving around the placements a little bit in my opinion. So instead of getting like 4th or 5th, depending on whether you do well or do badly, it's going to be like 3rd or 6th in those cases. Obviously these numbers aren't exact, it's just an estimate, but it's just one way to kind of think of the comp. So mainly you're going to be doing Kaisa carry. I don't like Rek'Sai carry in Void. If I do a Rek'Sai carry, I much prefer it in a brawler build. So I just focus on Kaisa, give her some ramping items, because ideally your Void units are doing all the tanking and buying a lot of time for her. And then just make sure you have at least one challenger to get her to like get the attack speed bonus and the challenger effect as well. Next build up we have is Noxus Reroll. I thought this build would have been better because they changed Katarina's targeting a little bit. It should be better, but it hasn't quite hit the spot for me yet. Definitely still try it. Katarina isn't as useless as before if the change actually went through properly. But at the end of the day, Darius is still going to be a beast. And if you, again, have champion duplicators to kind of reroll for this comp, it's definitely something very well worth exploring, especially if you played Noxus in the early game. Next build up we have is Demacia. Demacia is just a Garen reroll comp. I think it's still pretty solid with the Master Yi strategy of pumping up and then just building items only for Garen and Lux. There are other ways to play this. Some people play it with Kayle and Garen, though I prefer just playing with Garen. And then the gotta go fast thing is always pretty funny to kind of see because he just like runs around really quickly. It is kind of a go big or go home comp, so you do have to keep that in mind as well. But personally, if you want to like one trick a comp, it's not bad to do. Just make sure you're not contested when you're doing so. Shurima, decently solid. Getting a +1 Shurima definitely pushes this comp into the next level. Nasus I think is really good as like a secondary damage dealer / tank. Akshan, if you have leftover AD items, kind of throw it on him, but I wouldn't really care too much about Akshan. But obviously Azir is going to be your main man. He's going to want the Rage Blade plus 2 other damage items to just run through a lot of enemy teams. Next build up we have is Rek'Sai Reroll. Again, this is the Bruiser build that we were talking about earlier. Titans, BT, IE, all those items are really good on Rek'Sai. But this comp is really, really hit or miss. Compared to the other 3-cost rerolls, where you stabilize pretty decently with like a 2-star Darius and Noxus, 2-star Karma's okay and Invokers, Rek'Sai 2 is really, really bad, and you will bot 4 if you don't get Rek'Sai 3. I feel like this is much more hit or miss compared to the other 3-cost reroll comps because Rek'Sai has that whole like killing threshold thing, which makes it really hard for Rek'Sai 2 to kill any tanks. For this one, it's even more important to like only go for it in very specific spots. I wouldn't just force it. Like Darius reroll, you could kind of just force it just because the comp is just better. Even though you'd want Darius 3-star, like Darius 2-star could get you pretty far. But with Rek'Sai, like if you don't get Rek'Sai 3, the game's pretty much over. So just keep that in mind whenever you're playing this. Next build up we have is Gunner. This is like the attack damage backup build. Zeri is still very powerful. She's going to be removed in the next set, so definitely play her now if you enjoy her. Rage Blade plus 2 items are my preferred, but Death Blade is definitely my favorite damage item. And then Urgot, same builds as always. BT Titans plus 1 random item as the 3rd one. It could almost be anything. And then Sejuani main tank, similar to the Deadeye build. Next up, we have Samira Cassio Reroll. This one, not too much to say. It has gotten weaker, but it's still decently playable. You just have to go for it in the right spot. So if you do have a lot of copies of Samira early on, definitely go for it. But definitely don't just force the build. You can top 4 a lot with this, but trying to go further than that is a little bit troublesome, at least in my experience. You need to hit some of the legendaries, but if you don't have a lot of gold because you rerolled early on, it's kind of hard to hit some of those legendaries in order to really pop off. So just keep that in mind whenever you're playing this. It's good to it's really good to win a lot in the early to mid game, but in the late game, it does kind of fall off a bit. Akshan Reroll, still solid. It's a 3-cost reroll, so again, it's really dependent on if you hit or not. Same with everything else, so only go for this on portals, which give you a lot of econ, augments, which give you a lot of econ, because that's really the only way to play 3-cost reroll in a lot of cases if they aren't like super meta. So apart from like the Karma and Darius build, like the Akshans, the Rek'Sais, you're going to need a little more to get your team going because you're a little more reliant on the 3-stars getting hit. But Akshan Reroll is pretty good if you're going for the attack damage tree and you're going for like Aphelios, you're going for Zeri. But then randomly, instead of hitting Aphelios, you hit like 6 Akshans. You're like, maybe I could like roll for Akshan 3. Those are going to be the games where you play this. And then hopefully those games go decently well. But that's pretty much the only time I would kind of play the Akshan build. Built different, only do with built different prismatic. There's not really too much to say here. It's just a very solid augment. And is it top 4 guaranteed? Probably not, but it's pretty close to it. One trap I see is that people itemize Zeri a lot in built different, but I feel like Zeri's pretty useless without a Zon augment. So I do prefer using like Aphelios or Kaisa instead as a main carries. That's not to say that you can't use Zeri. Sometimes we don't have a choice because we only have a 2-star Zeri, don't have a 2-star Aphelios, but definitely like aim more towards the Aphelios and the Zeri whenever you're doing a built different comp. Next build up we have is Tristana Rerolll. This comp is going to be going away, but it's very powerful still. If and only if you're able to hit it early, because it's really reliant on getting 4 gunner, and you can't get 4 gunner without reaching level 8, or you can maybe hit it at level 7 with a +1 gunner augment. But again, since you're re-rolling, it's kind of hard to hit level 8 because you spend so much gold looking for Tristana, so you really have to pick the right spots to play this. Only play this if you're getting a ton of Tristanas early on and Maokai's, and you're able to 3-star 3 units in order to get the Yordle buff for 4-star Tristana. It makes it a little tricky to play, so even though the comp seems easy, which it is overall, you still have to pay attention to certain things because you do need to have enough econ to get up to 4 gunner. But do a 1-cost reroll for this build. And by the way, I know I am going through these comps kind of quickly. If you do want more info, head on over to the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta, and you could read all the descriptions there in case you need more info on the comp. It's kind of like nearing the end of the set, so that's why we're kind of going through this a little bit quicker, because most of this, a lot of the returning viewers already kind of know this. So Rogue Reroll is going to be the next build. Rogue is extremely weird because they did get buffed. Katarina specifically got buffed. So does that make it completely playable? It makes it better. I'm not saying it's not good, but it's nothing like extraordinary. I thought the buffs would do a little more, but nothing crazy is happening so far yet. Maybe there's some weird way to play them that no one has figured out yet, but overall, after the Katarina buffs, like the targeting buffs, we're not in like some sort of rogue meta or anything, which I guess is a good thing, because rogue meta would kind of be annoying, but I would like them to be like a little better than they are now. But definitely try them out if you haven't already. Zed's being removed, so if you want to play Zed reroll, this is kind of the last time to do it. Next build up is really fun too. This is the Ekko reroll build. Ekko reroll was so wild at the start of the set when it was good, but then they nerfed it and we haven't really seen that much of it since, even though it's like still playable. But I do encourage people to try these builds out because they are something to kind of look out for in the future. But that's going to round out all the A tiers right now. In the B tier, Teemo's dropping down a little bit. If you're a Teemo player, if you're a Teemo main, definitely keep playing it because they are going to be removing Teemo. But it's pretty much just a multicaster build, and then you just itemize your Teemo. Hopefully gets to 4-star and then kind of pops off, throwing all the mushrooms out there after that. Ravenous Hunter Warwick, yeah, it's seen better days. It's good that it's kind of lower now because it was a little oppressive in my opinion, so it's kind of good. So it's kind of in a good spot now. Jinx reroll, it's decent, but you kind of need to hit late game, but not the best comp right now. I wouldn't play it too much. Kayle reroll, I guess in very specific places you could play it. Some people play with Kayle too and then pivot into like Aphelios Bastion. That's one way to kind of use Kayle. But in terms of like regular Kayle 3-star, reaching level 9 type of playstyle, only do it on like Scuttle Puddle. Any other map would make it very difficult to do so because you need like so much gold to make this build work. But again, there are cases where it is possible. You just have to look for those spots. Riftwalker Kassadin, yeah, not that great. Only play it with Kassadin Augment though. But I guess if you get like a ton of Kassadins early, or you have perfect items for him at the start of the game, then try it out. But if not, it's like sometimes the Bastions are too contested because of all the Aphelios players. That's kind of the trouble with this comp in my opinion. Next build up we have is Multicaster Reroll. This is Sona and Vel'Koz. It's decent. It's nothing great, nothing horrible, but definitely better things to play out there. And then yeah, that's going to pretty much round out all the comps right now. Again, this will be the last meta snapshot of the set. I'll probably be going on vacation next week, so I will definitely see everybody once the new set is out on the 13th. We're going to be trying to be releasing as many things as possible, so I do hope to see you all there. But if you do want to see the set 9 stuff, I did make like a kind of preview video of just like going over some of the articles that they released. So if you're bored, go ahead and check that out if you're curious about set 9.5. But that's going to be it for me today. Hope to see you all later. And also, shout out to Voidsin for working with me on this meta snapshot, and do get coaching from him if you want to just like do a last minute climb if you want to get a certain rank, because there are end of season ranked rewards that you can kind of get based on your rank. So that's all on the coaching page on the website. It's all like easily accessible. So head on over there if you are interested in more info. But that's going to be it from me today. Hope to see you all next time. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe. And of course, smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.